I'm recording this podcast from my studio today, a hot summer August morning in Southern California, and as if on cue to introduce the topic of today's episode, a lizard has displayed itself prominently doing some push-ups on the roof of my neighbor's home. Are you like me? Do you also wonder what he's doing? He looks like perhaps he's showing off to find a date. Perhaps, just like us, he's lonely and looking for love. I have no data for this, just a feeling. Scientists would slap my wrist, of course, scold me for anthropomorphizing, projecting my humanity onto animals, and maybe so. Perhaps he is simply running on autopilot, executing automatic behavior like a computer program with no higher sense of self-awareness or self-reflection. But I don't really believe that. Everyone has thought at some point, what is going on in the minds of animals? Do they think? Do they feel? Do they understand each other's minds? Can we ever know for sure? Objectively, can we even really know the minds of our fellow human beings? So perhaps these aren't the right kinds of questions to ask. What science can help us understand is what animals do, how they behave, how their brains work, how they make decisions, how they socialize and communicate, and how they likely feel and experience their worlds. So how does learning more about the minds of other animals help us to rewire our own and our own perception of everyday things? Well, by the end of this episode, you'll understand how other animals have many of our abilities and traits, how some animals far surpass our abilities, and the one attribute that actually unites the entire animal kingdom. You'll see how our human perspective on thought is just one interpretation, and you may be humbled to learn that animals have superpowers of mind and body that we could only dream of. By peering into the souls of these beautiful creatures and comparing them with our own, you'll gain a better understanding of what it actually means to think, to communicate, and most importantly, what it means to feel. It turns out that perhaps it's not language or thought, but emotion that is the beautiful commonality that binds the animal kingdom together. My name is Christopher Grant Ward, and this is Rebel Nature. I'm an award-winning artist and naturalist obsessed with the ways nature can rewire our brains and change our perception of everyday things. I'm so happy you're listening. In the very earliest of times, when both people and animals lived on the earth, a person could become an animal if he or she wanted, and an animal could become a human being. Sometimes they were people and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. This passage from the author Edward Field is a great place to start this episode. Let's really ask ourselves, what is it that makes us human? How are animals different from us, if at all? And how can understanding the minds of other animals help us understand ourselves better? Well, let's start with the most commonly held belief, that we humans possess one beautiful attribute that is privy only to us, our language. It's been a long-held notion that our ability to imagine, speak, hear, and process words, to create meaning was our unique achievement, a mark of our superiority in civilization. Well, I'll say at least it's certainly what we like to do. Perhaps even more than speech, language is often seen as the precursor to thought, as humans need some sort of lexicon to even imagine concepts like choose a different color. To even have this discussion, you and I need a concept of what a color is, the concept of what different is. We need to be able to define these concepts in a way that can be shared and agreed upon. For humans, this is all done with words. However, studies of a number of animal species have been proven to show that animals can vocalize and imitate. They can control and create sounds in a variety of modulations that work as communication. The mockingbird on your roof is a common example in the United States of advanced vocal learning and imitation. Even more fascinating, the Australian lyrebird can perfectly imitate chainsaws, cameras, car alarms, sawing wood. All the following sounds I'm about to play are created by a bird. It's really hard to tell the difference. But surprisingly, the lyrebird actually can't imitate a human voice. But a few animals can. Dogs, apes, gorillas, elephants, and orca whales have all been shown to reproduce audible human words in response to human cues. Of course, the unmatched human vocalizers are the parrot family, who can consistently build a vocabulary of dozens to hundreds of words and respond consistently. And while memorization and reproduction of sound is admirable, this is far from proof that an animal can possess abstract linguistic thought. A bird can easily be trained to create a sound X when sound Y is heard in exchange for, say, a treat. So using learned sounds to represent abstract thought in context to communicate was long thought to be something only humans could do. However, Alex changed all of that. Alex wasn't a person, but an African gray parrot who lived from 1976 to 2007 when he died of heart disease. During his life, he was capable of a wide range of linguistic vocalizations, and Alex is considered the smartest bird ever documented. He could not only communicate sounds, but understand the underlying abstract concepts and respond appropriately.
How many? 2. That's right. You're a good boy. What color bigger? What color bigger? Green. Oh, you're a good boy.
Alex could be asked a question such as, what difference, when he was shown a red and green block, to which he would answer color. He could describe a key as a key no matter what its size or color, and then he could tell you how one key was different from the others. When asked what color, he could tell you if the key was red or blue, or what matter, and he could tell you if a key was made of wood, fabric, rock, or so on. He could tell you the number of blue wooden balls on a tray filled with many shapes, materials, and colors. He could tell you there were 4 balls on a plate and 4 notes played on a piano. He understood what 4 was, abstracted from an object. In fact, Alex could identify 50 different objects, recognize quantities up to 6, and he could distinguish 7 colors and 5 shapes. He understood the concepts of bigger, smaller, same, and different. And before he died of heart failure in 2007, he was already learning prepositions such as over and under, as well as pronouns such as I want to go back now versus you don't know. But most notably, Alex is the first non-human ever to be recorded as asking his own questions. Once he looked in a mirror and he confirmed that he knew he was looking at himself. He then proceeded to ask, what color? He wanted to know what color he was. He was taught the word gray, and he remembered his own color for his entire life. Not even great apes who learn sign language have ever known to ask a novel question. Alex also passed increasingly difficult tests that measure object permanence, the ability to understand that a hidden or unseen object or person still exists. This requires incredibly difficult understanding of symbols and reasoning and pretend play, memory development, and language development. In fact, Alex showed surprise and anger when confronted with non-existent objects or ones that were different than what he had been led to believe were hidden during the test. And to me, this is what's the most special thing about Alex, that he's able to understand and express human concepts separate from really having a grasp of our language. A limited grammar and vocabulary still revealed his knowledge of the abstract concepts. Like anyone who has ever tried to use a foreign language, you know that you flex the limited knowledge you have, knowing others will also hold in their minds similar concepts about the quantity of things, the value of items, the location of museums, when, where, how. All these concepts that can be abstracted from the objects. Regardless of a limited language, Alex was aware of the essence of things, the context of communication, questions, and answers, and also what he was imagining in his mind and what others were imagining in theirs, showing that conceptual thought need not be limited to human language. Alex's amazing achievements also began to measure an animal's ability to communicate as we do. But to me, that's not even really a fair test. If the brains of most animals are considerably different, why wouldn't their communication be as well? Take cetaceans, the family of aquatic mammals that comprise whales, dolphins, porpoises, and orcas. They use some of the most complex forms of vocal communication presently known in the animal kingdom. Orca calls, in particular, carry dialects among different pods or groups of whales, which can't be understood by members outside of their circle. And orca sounds are very dense, very rich. They vary in intensity, volume, and tone. The problem here with language is that the same science that scolded me for anthropomorphizing the lizard's push-ups must also be scolded for creating a human definition of language. Carl Sagan once famously observed that it is of interest to note that while some dolphins are reported to have learned up to 50 words of English, no human being has ever been reported to learn any word in dolphin. And not just language. Orcas and dolphins also bring up another attribute where humans have long believed they are superior, and that's intelligence. For decades, the evaluation of intelligence was simply the comparison of another animal's cognitive ability to our own, giving animals multiple choice questions, puzzles, or human-related tasks. But more and more these days, scientists now believe intelligence ought to be evaluated in a species-specific way, highlighting the abilities that make it possible for a species to dominate in their own environment. So in the case of orcas and whales, a marine environment requires a much different brain. And while we can't comprehend it fully, we know specifically that orcas perceive the world in a way we could only imagine. Their highly developed paralimbic systems and amygdala allow for incredible spatial memory and navigation, also emotional learning and the development of long-term memory. They are by far the most acoustically attuned animal on the planet, with the second largest brain after sperm whales. To us, it would seem as if they possessed a sixth sense for using sound to understand their surroundings underwater. They also create a wide variety of clicks, whistles, and pulsed calls to communicate. Both dolphins and orcas can see with sound, being able to look directly through opaque barriers and be able to use sound to see what's on the other side. It's also theorized that orcas can send sonic pictures to one another. Think of it. If we could simply send each other rich, complete images of information that could convey concepts and ideas and abstract thoughts, words would be primitive and meaningless. So if orcas' brains are structurally and fundamentally different, then the criteria for their intelligence would almost certainly be different than ours. It's really not hard to imagine that orcas might see us as somewhat curious, charming, yet obtuse and limited creatures, as far as the estimates of intelligence which they value most. In comparison to them, we are literally quite deaf and dumb with our primitive words and hearing. And probably more importantly, it's just as likely that humans are the ones who are defined by this obsession with intelligence, and perhaps other brilliant species simply have no opinion on the matter. Okay, so if animals can acquire different intelligences in different environments, communicate with each other, and also have the ability for abstract thought, then what do humans really believe might set us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom? What about tools? Our ability to use and create tools seems to be one of the hallmarks of the onset of human civilization. We think of the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Industrial Age, and so on. And yet we know that many animals, including elephants, fish, reptiles, beavers, birds, octopuses, a variety of insects, use objects in tool-like ways to solve problems. However, it's long believed that humans and other primates were really the only ones shown to be able to create new tools in new situations in response to novel problems. I mean, we know that over 30 species of primates, they use tools to hunt, to process food, to forage, and collect water. So we took tool making and manufacturing as one of the hallmarks of being human. That is, until we studied crows, in particular New Caledonian crows, who not only use but create brand new tools. As we study these birds, we've come to learn about their incredible abilities to trim, sew, finely rip, bend, and flex natural materials into specific tools that have been designed to solve incredibly specific problems they've never encountered before. They literally employ a manufacturing process, like a factory, that creates tools in steps, showing a strong awareness of the proper sequence of things. These crows can also spontaneously make new tools using materials that they don't encounter in the wild, such as wire and plastic. As well, crows can use mirrors to see information out of their direct line of sight, then orient and use that information to solve problems. For example, maybe there's a hidden stick that could have been grabbed easily once seen, and an angled mirror is used to look behind another object and find it. Crows are also one of the only animals besides humans to use meta tools. That is, using tools for other tools. Let me explain. In one study, food was placed in a box out of the crow's reach. The crows were given a stick, far too short to reach the food. However, this short stick could be used to get a longer stick from another box, which then could be used to retrieve the food. This complex behavior involved the crow realizing that one tool could be used on a non-food, non-goal object, suppressing the urge to go directly for the food. This problem was solved by 6 of the 7 birds on their first attempt. And what's most fascinating is that crows pass down these skills. In particular, the tool designs and methods of manufacturing. They pass them down to younger generations. And tools used in one isolated group will be different than another, based on the food they're foraging, the culture of the birds, and the mindset of the group. This particular fact reminded me a lot of a comparison, say, between chopsticks and forks in Western and Asian cuisine. Because as we know, tools and tool use are not just part of our advancement as human beings, they're part of our culture. Okay, so what about culture? Human cultural systems are certainly unique, yet we also know a lot about the complex social systems of animals. Actually, far too much to put into this episode. I found so much information I actually could make another episode in the future. But for now, here's some of the most fascinating highlights about animal cultures. Okay, number 1, we know definitively that parrots give their children names, and dolphins adopt their own names, unique whistles that are a variant of their mother's signature whistle. Both dolphins and parrots carry these names with them throughout their lives to remember each other as individuals and call out to them specifically. Think about how important names are to the fabric of culture, to create social bonds, to build your reputation, to find mates and build friendships. Names are a fundamental aspect of building a society, and they only have a function and could only possibly be important to a species interested in building a cultural, social system like we have. And the social similarities with humans continue. It's also the little things. Octopuses, apes, rats, dogs, parrots, and dolphins all seem to have a sense of humor. Magic tricks and illusions cause what could only be interpreted as a joyful reaction. They tease one another, they tickle one another. They find enjoyment in the social interaction of physical roughhousing. And studies show that this type of play is critical to the development of social cognition and social awareness. In fact, studies show that females are much more likely to be attracted to males with more social play experience, as these males are more likely to have more friends, be held in higher standing by those friends, and thus have better chances of survival. Popularity, it seems, is not only human. Our desire to be well-liked, well-known, and accepted as part of the group stems from a very fundamental evolutionary purpose. And speaking of skill sets, all right, so what about art and design? Certainly humans are the pioneers of aesthetic creation. Well, like all art, perhaps this is also subjective, because elephants, gorillas, donkeys, even a pig named Pigcasso can create abstract paintings that are quite beautiful. Birds clearly show rhythm to music and know how to dance. And elephants have shown remarkable musicianship, the ability to distinguish 12 tones on the musical scale, remember simple melodies, and even play different instruments at different pitches and meters. In fact, this beautiful chime music you're listening to right now was performed by elephants in the Thai Elephant Orchestra. Check them out. Meanwhile, in Australia, just to attract a mate, the bowerbird spends hours arranging a mosaic collection of hundreds of shells, leaves, flowers, feathers, stones, berries, even discarded plastic items, coins, rifle shells, or glass, in elegant diorama displays. Several studies show that the colors used are meant to match the preferences of the female they're trying to attract, and each bowerbird uses its own flair and interpretation. Bowerbirds understand a complex depth of field to create optical illusions, arranging objects in the court area from smallest to largest, creating a forced perspective, which holds the attention of the female for longer. It's even been shown that males with the strongest optical illusions are most likely to have a higher mating success. These complex mating behaviors suggest that bowerbirds have some of the most complex behaviors in the entire animal kingdom. And fascinatingly, they're not alone. This is almost the exact same way that the white-spotted pufferfish tries to attract its mate, underwater, by creating large geometric patterns in the sand of the seafloor. Using its belly, the fish begins with a simple circle shape in the sand, and then creates an array of valleys and peaks by waving its fins and creating a center by using in and out movements. Females consider the size and number of the peaks and valleys, the overall size of the circle, the colors used, the sand composition. This is believed to be the most geometrically ordered structure created by any fish and perhaps any animal. Artistic sentiments aside, this is also interesting because typically in the animal kingdom, it's physical attributes that win out in sexual selection. But with bowerbirds and pufferfish, and also with humans, these are some of the only species we know of where an individual's creative ability and work output plays a role in sexual attraction and selection. In these species, creative ability acts as a powerful mechanism to shape the evolution of the species. Okay, so besides being an artist or a hunter, we also know that being a teacher may very well be the only other non-human profession in the animal kingdom. While most animals learn skills from watching their elders, we know there are a few animals who actively teach their young. And for science, this definition of teaching is quite specific. The teacher must modify their behavior around the pupil with no benefit to the teacher, and then the pupil's skills are improved as a result. Astonishingly, as specific as this is, rock ants pass this test with flying colors. They show one another the way to a new food source, even slowing down at their own peril to let the newbie keep up and note helpful landmarks. Pied babblers in southern Africa school their young to associate a purr call with getting food, and fairy wrens teach a literal password to their chicks even before they hatch, which they'll later use to call for food. And meerkats put themselves in grave danger to show their young how to handle scorpions, one of the main sources of prey. So it appears that humans have a great deal in common with other animals. At least, it's easy to see strong reflections of our humanity in other species. Our language, our ability for conceptual thought, for intelligence, for creating tools, for solving problems, having names, comedy, laughter, art, even teaching. It seems like we're not really alone in any of these departments, and in many we're well matched. But perhaps more fundamental to our humanity is our awareness of ourselves, our consciousness. Are other animals even aware of what they're doing? One prevailing sentiment is that human beings are unlike animals, not because of our skills, but because we alone hold a subjective sense of the world and our awareness of self. So how could we evaluate this in other animals? Well, one basic way to evaluate self-recognition would be to use what's called the mirror test. An animal is sedated and harmlessly marked in a location they can't see without looking in a mirror, like their forehead. If the animal spontaneously directs any sort of grooming behavior toward the mark, trying to wipe it off, that is taken as an indication that they're aware of their body as their own and separate from the rest of the image they're looking at, that they're aware of who they are and what they look like. Chimpanzees, elephants, bonobos, orangutans, gorillas, bottlenose dolphins, killer whales, magpies, corvids, and pigeons can all easily pass the mirror test. Also, it should go without saying that very young infants don't pass the mirror test, that it takes a number of years before a child can recognize themselves in the mirror. However, this is a very visually dominant test. Other tests that use smell have shown that dogs also have a very strong sense of self-recognition when smells are used instead of visual cues. And also as well that fish have a sense of self-recognition as well. So I think perhaps finally this is coming to the place that matters most to me. If other animals are observed to do what we do and make what we make, even to a degree or a difference in kind, and sometimes in better ways than we can ever imagine, if they also form social bonds, if they play, if they spend time with each other, and also are self-aware of their existence in the world, then if we all do similar things, then for me the most important takeaway here is perhaps we all feel similar things. In preparation for this podcast, I did a lot of research on animal emotion. I'm going to go ahead and skip past the naysayers, and I'm going to put all of their research and statements in the show notes for you to read. I am going to say that the majority of researchers studying animal emotion are now of the opinion these days that humans can't be the only ones to experience emotions, that it's unlikely that the more complex emotions such as love and grief only evolved in humans and are not manifest in other animals, that it's far less likely that only humans feel emotion, and much more likely that we all have quite a few emotions in common. In the mammal's brain specifically, the insula plays diverse functions linked to the emotions that include compassion, empathy, self-awareness, and interpersonal experience. And it's not humans, but rather orcas and dolphins that have the most highly developed insula region of their brain. And of course, we can observe them with deeply complex emotions, showing powerful empathy for each other and also for us, for humans. And we can observe this quite plainly. Dolphins act in ways that can only be explained as bored in captivity, or anxious, or stubborn when asked to do repeated tests, or frustrated, or angry. And it's not just our friends in the ocean. Anyone with a pet knows that each one of our furry souls has its own preferences, its own opinions, its own, what do they call them, beige flags. It's very difficult to deny categorically that no other animals enjoy themselves, that wolves aren't happy when they reunite, their tails wagging loosely to and fro, and whining and jumping about. That elephants hold family reunions for non-emotional reasons, that they're not greeting in celebration, flapping their ears and spinning about, and emitting these vocalizations known in the scientific world as the greeting rumble. Likewise, animals must be feeling grief to remove themselves from their social group upon the death of a friend, when they sulk, stop eating, and die. What other reason than mourning does an orca mother push her dead calf around in the water for weeks? This is sentience, the ability to feel a range of emotions and feelings, such as pleasure and joy and fear and pain. While scientists have known for centuries that all animals respond to pain stimuli, this was often discounted as an autonomic survival response, that pain wasn't internalized, realized, remembered, endured. But recent studies show definitively that not just primates, but orcas, whales, fish, birds, reptiles, and cephalopods feel pain subjectively, let's say emotionally, just as we do. So thus, they suffer just as we do. And the implications here open up serious questions to our treatment of other animals. And it's perhaps why it's so hard for us humans to accept self-awareness in other animals. It would be very difficult to explain factory farming, fisheries, or other industrialized food processes that certainly cause an impact on animals. An impact that surely would be considered chronic suffering if it was being endured by humans. But the more we learn about the minds of animals, the harder it is to justify practices that cause them to suffer. It's also harder to neglect that animals don't just want to not suffer, but they want to feel positive emotions too. Like us, they want to feel good. They want to enjoy their lives. They want to exert control over their lives. They want to have choices. They want to be able to play, feel satiated and comfortable. They like to solve problems. They like to get excited. They enjoy seeking the comfort of companions. These things matter to animals just like they matter to us. Our understanding of animal sentience still varies depending on the species. Some groups of animals, like mammals, receive far more attention. But here the question becomes, how much like us do animals have to be before we start caring and paying attention. So what does it actually mean to be human? If everything that we value about being human, we find reflected, expressed, or often improved upon by the millions of other animals swimming, flying, walking, and roaming this planet. Perhaps it's not about the comparison at all. Perhaps it's not about being special, but it's about understanding what connects us all and finding humility in the shadows of our beautiful relatives. For me, rebel nature is about harmony. It's about letting go of the modern world and finding a common denominator with the natural one. Outside of language, our human thought and logic, our human sense of intelligence, outside of our human understanding of the world. And today, I'm seeing that common denominator is emotion. As humans, emotion is that one place that our beautiful words fail us. I can tell you I'm sad, but isn't it my face that really shows you? I can describe Yosemite Valley in language, but I can't communicate the feeling of being there, no matter how hard I try. We see words as an advantage, but perhaps language hinders as well as it helps. We could learn something from animals who live directly in the emotional world without words. For us, art is our best expression of emotion. Poetry is the best way to describe Yosemite. Emotions transcend our words. They transcend intelligence, logic, cognitive ability. The most beautiful moments in our lives are the ones where we share how we feel with one another, not what we think. And as we've learned, all animals have emotion. So perhaps it's in our best interest to feel more and think less, listen more and speak less, to have empathy for one another and for the animals which live and die by our ability to tap into empathy and live in harmony with the world. I see today that it's emotion which truly makes humans into animals and animals human. And it's the one thread that helps us to better understand the nature that we long for right outside our windows. Thank you for listening to my podcast, Rebel Nature. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to follow this podcast and also make sure to share it with one person that you think might find it worthwhile. Support for Rebel Nature comes from an affiliate partnership with Blick Art Supplies. Rebel Nature is managed and produced by Quail Run Studios. Original music written and recorded by me. Any commercial music that may have been used in this episode has been licensed for airplay by the Harry Fox Agency, 40 Wall Street, New York, New York. You can learn more about me and my art at ChristopherGrantWard.com.